What I want to talk about now is the role of the brain in the development of self-regulation. What I think a lot of us, when we go through school, especially teachers, at least they used to, I don't know, I'm probably going to show my age here. They used to talk a lot about the right and the left brain, language, motor skills. Girls have this side stronger, boys have this side stronger. As an occupational therapist, when I first started realizing that we were putting out fires all the time, and that's the way that I put it when we had a classroom setting, I felt like I was always being pulled in to put out a fire. By the time the fire is set, it's too late. It's already burning. But I felt like day in and day out, that's all I was doing, was like, okay, all right, so we're all dysregulated because it's a spiral that's happening. So I started looking at some of the things related to emotional development, social emotional development. It led me straight to the brain because instead of learning about this, what I realized I had to know more about was emotions, how the brain develops, and developmentally how this brain evolves, okay? So what I want to do is I want to spend a little bit of time talking about, let's divide our brain a little bit differently. Instead of doing right and left, what I'm going to do right now is we're going to slice myself horizontally, all right? And if I had a pointer, which I can get up, what you would do is, Brainstem, we're going to do a little line right there. And where I'm talking about is the back part of our brain right here. So I'm going to take a slice, and I'm going to talk about the brainstem. Where did you guys see this already? You see what's up here? Heart rate, blood pressure, respiration, muscle tone, sleep-wake cycles. First order. Okay, that's your brainstem. Hence, you're born with what you're born with. This is autonomic nervous system functioning. Okay? I'm never going to be any taller than I am because my parents weren't tall. I'm always going to have brown eyes because everybody in my family, my mom and dad had the brown eyes. You're born with what you're born with. Okay? So that was the whole premise behind if you have early issues. So the brain stem, what you have to look at here is, remember back when there's those issues of vegetative state. What was the individual? Diane Quinlan was one, and then there was, anyhow, the argument with that was she had had a closed head injury, I believe it was. Remember, they kept saying, is she still alive? Is she feeling? You can stay alive with just your brain stem because that regulates your body function. So if you look at all of this, I can function quite well with just my brain stem operating because it's heart rate, blood pressure, respiratory status, okay?
I wouldn't call it quite well.
Well, true. I wouldn't call it well either. You're right. That's a good one. But what you want to do is you want to think about, here's where our children are having issues from the beginning, okay, is that brain stem level. So what you're going to do now is we're going to talk about something called the limbic system. The limbic system is your emotional brain. And where we are now is the middle of our skull, the middle of our brain is your limbic system. There are some really, really key parts within your emotional brain. And that's what I like to call it, is it's our emotional brain. You have to realize that we're moving upwards. So this is deep, deep inside our brain, the core. There's one structure called the hippocampus that I have listed up there. And what you have to know about the hippocampus is it is responsible for memory and learning. Well, that's interesting. That's in my emotional brain. Wouldn't cognition in the top of my brain, my cortex, do that? No. Your hippocampus in your emotional brain / limbic system is responsible for memory and learning. But it only gives you dry facts. Okay? Dry facts. There's the blocks. There's Miss Julie. There's my train. There's a classroom. That's my bed. Okay? That's all it tells you. Okay? That's what that whole brain structure is responsible for. In this part of our brain, we have another key structure called the amygdala. Here's where I get to be a little bit of a sexist because it says Amy. In the beginning of it, I'm like, think of that as the emotional part. Okay? I know, see? I love to still do that, though. Yeah, it's bad. So the amygdala is also responsible for memory and learning. Okay? So now you have two parts of your brain in your emotional part that's responsible for memory and learning. But the amygdala gives you the emotional component behind memory and learning. It's the feeler. Okay? If you look at, there's all these different theories of autism, what's exactly going on. They are looking at the amygdala a little bit to kind of see what that brain structure looks like. Is it smaller with this group of kids? There's been some, and that's been a while ago since I'd seen any new research on that, but they look at the amygdala to see, is that actual key structure which is responsible for emotional part of our brain, is that smaller in this group of children, okay? So now you have those two key brain parts, the hippocampus and the amygdala. So let's think about our little children, okay, who overreact, right? Who respond too quickly. I'm going to have to put my watch so I can keep a track of myself. What happens in that brain when the amygdala gets overactivated? There's this little system that goes, okay? It's the sentinel. And that part is this next thing, the reticular activating system. The best way to remember this is the keyword activating. This is what makes kids fight, flight, or fright. Okay, what we call FFF. And it's the one that impulses immediately go to. That amygdala says, oh my gosh. Let's see if I can get a good example. You've got a child who what we call has tactile issues. They don't like how things feel. Okay? You're trying to figure out why they won't go to your sensory areas, the sand play, the rice table, all of that, Play-Doh, GAC, glue. What happens is the memory of the hippocampus says, oh, there she goes again. She wants me to cut color and glue. I hate how that feels. Do you have the kids who are constantly pulling down their sleeves, keeping things off their hands? These are the kids who don't like to crawl a lot either. Well, what'll happen is as those nervous systems, say your skin receptors say, ooh, I don't like how this feels, the amygdala gets emotional content happening. All right? So impulses start firing. I don't like this. So the hippocampus says, there's cut, color, glue. Just dry facts. The amygdala says, I don't like it. Sends impulses to the reticular activating system that says, tell her, no, 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 no. I don't want to do this. And what you guys will see happen, when I said fight, flight, or fright, that goes at least, hopefully, that should start sequentially. You'll see kids say to you first, no, 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 no. I can't. I don't want to. I can't transition. So you'll see them first, hopefully, you will hear them say, I can't do it. If we're busy and we can't hear that no, 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 and if we're not being a detective and don't realize why the no, no, no is happening, they go into flight. I'm out of here. I'm gone. I'm under the table. I'm out the door. I'm not transitioning. I'm not going to do it. So if we haven't heard them say no, 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 or I can't, or I don't want to, and then they start moving away from us, what's going to happen last? Fight. Somebody's going to get it. And remember the first page where I talked about you have to have command of language? Think about you're not the adult that's with that child, but you have 2 3-year-olds. And this 3-year-old's saying no, 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 and they don't have command of language. Do you see where the tussles happen a lot of times with these group of kids? Because we're wanting them in third order, and that just isn't happening for this group of kids. They don't have strategies. They don't know to ask for help. They don't know what to do. Because that first line again is they're not aware. Okay? They're not aware of what's happening. This just feels normal to them all day long. Okay? So that emotional brain, what we call it is a neural hijacking, because the key thing, if you want to write anything during this system too, is you feel before you think. It's the nature of our brain. You feel your emotions before you think about it. Remember the first page that said, what is self-regulation? What was one of the key things we said that we want them to do? Make choices. Think about stopping something and starting something. Okay? These kids can't do that because they're stuck in that emotional brain. Does that kind of make sense to you guys? So really, if you do anything, like maybe, after you leave here, is I would tell you these are the key parts of the brain that I would educate yourself on. The hippocampus, the amygdala. Because a lot of the strategies that we use for parents, for teachers, for caregivers, comes from knowing those brain structures and watching children and saying, oh my gosh, look at what just happened. Okay? He's stuck in that emotional brain, and I've got to get him out of that. All right? So we're not even really at the top of our cortex yet. The next part I want to just talk a little bit about is your frontal lobe. Okay? Up here, the frontal lobe. And what that part of your brain is responsible for is reasoning, language, especially the use of language is in that frontal lobe, and reducing the urge to just react. And what do our kids do? They just react. This is your impulse control part of your brain, the frontal lobe. Okay? If you read a little bit about your frontal lobe, what you'll find out is you have burst of energy in this part of your brain. But guess when a big burst happens the first time? At age 5. Developmentally, this is an immature nervous system. And so we're asking kids at an earlier and earlier age to sit still, make choices, play with friends, and not just one friend. We're asking them to do it with what? 12 and 13 other kids. And so what I'm saying is we're asking them to do frontal lobe work when they've got first order regulation, brainstem, limbic system issues. And so if you keep knowing the brain, when you want them to get to that higher level, it'll make sense to you because you'll start gathering information. You'll start being the detective and asking, how's his body temperature? How does he sleep? What's his play look like? Okay? So that's what the frontal lobe does, and impulses get sent that way. So it helps you reduce the urge to just react, fight, flight, or fright. Okay? But you see how we've moved up this brain? And so what's the cortex? It's your thinking brain. That was the third order that we talked about. So again, remember, it develops first order, second order, third order, brainstem, limbic system, frontal lobe, cortex. So think about the brain. So as a therapist, what I always say to a lot of people is, I think developmentally for this group of kids from the bottom up. But what do we do in a lot of situations? We go from what? Top down. Because we're busy talking. How's that working for you? That's what I always say. I always go like, okay, you want to do that? And I'm like, wonder how that's working for them. It's not, is it? It's not working, you guys. And it's funny because when you walk in, I've got this warped sense of humor from doing this for so long, but it's because I just love it. You see these little guys and you're like, oh my gosh, look at this. I'm tired. You guys are tired. They're tired. And so, but that's what's happening is we're going from the top down. We're trying to keep them in the cortex. We're trying to keep them in the thinking brain. We're trying to keep them in executive function. Look at all the words we use for it. And everybody uses a different word, right? Executive function, brain, top of the brain. So instead of going top down, let's look at some things that help them from bottom up. Okay? Because that's how our brain develops, and we're talking about young children. Their brains aren't developed. Okay? All right. Let me get a little drink of water. So who cares? Why is this important? Well, recent research is showing this. If you Google self-regulation, you start reading articles. Why is early childhood such a big issue for people running for office? Why? Because they keep saying early intervention saves money in the long run. You know, you've got the controversy of, oh, they catch up by age 3. I'm telling you, if we don't I'm seeing that. Nope. This is why it's so important. And what I say to my parents is, if you have learning difficulties, you have issues reading, we can address that, right? We've got things that can do that. If you have behavioral issues and you can't get along with peers, with buddies, you're going to get kicked out of preschool, right? It's a lot harder to handle these social emotional components than it is if we have a set more towards a learning difficulty. I hope that came out right. Okay? It's what I always say is it's the Ted Kaczynski. Okay? His IQ was what? Off the charts. But what did he not have? Social emotional relationship with people. And that's what you're looking at with all this. There's a disconnect between that. So it's so important to have kids get self-regulation because look at what it helps develop. Taking turns, making friends. I adapt to my school and my home routines. School readiness skills. Following classroom routines, problem solving. It's so important that we help kids develop regulatory abilities because that's what allows them to learn. Okay? So, part of our learner objectives was, we're already to number 3 at this point. What was self-regulation? We talked about that. I gave you a list of things. Then I said, let's look at key brain components. We've talked about that. This is now leading into, I think it was probably number 3 that said, what are the common things that we see related to self-regulation difficulties? You can find this. They are researching all of this in babies and toddlers. These are the most common behaviors you will see. Fussiness and irritability. Colicky. Can't get to sleep. Crying a lot. Escalates quickly from a pleasant mood to an intense cry. Difficulty calming myself. What do I use to self-soothe? Am I the baby that will take the bottle? Can mom give me a toy? And remember, second order was mouth, hands, movement. As a baby and a toddler, I don't always just use my mouth to self-calm, do I? What do we give them? Toys to play with. And where do those toys go as a baby? To your mouth. So do you see the strategy that babies are using? So they're upset. We come over. We try to give them something if they've just had been fed. So you give them a toy and they hopefully self-calm. Okay? But what we're finding is that our children who have self-regulatory difficulties early on do not have that ability. Okay? So here's the cycle starts happening. Sleep difficulties. We see this across the board. I see it with my kids later on who are diagnosed with ADHD, have had terrible sleep histories when I go back and start asking parents. This is an issue we really, really have to help kids with and help families with, our sleep difficulties. You guys know how it is when you're tired. You can't think straight. You're irritable. You're fussy yourself. Okay? And we use second order strategies to get ourselves out of that by doing what? Coke, Pepsi, moving. So see, we do our own self-order. Between 25 and 30 months, so we're now talking about age 2 to 2.5, the most problem behavior that you're going to see is the difficulty in tolerating change. And again, that's one of the questions I'll ask my parents. How are transitions for your little one? Oh my gosh, if I make the wrong turn, they throw a fit. And you have a whole group of kids, remember I said they want predictability and routine, who are like, keep it the same, don't change this because I can't handle it. I want you to keep it the same, okay? Because that's going to be a strategy too. But that's at babies and toddlers. Now watch what happens when we go to 3 and 5-year-olds. You're going to see some similarities. Difficulty tolerating changes, irritable, sleep, but now food preferences start happening. We start getting the picky eater. And I'll have a lot of times parents say that to me. Oh no, he was fantastic up until I don't know what happened. At age 2, he got picky. And a lot of these kids go for Carbs. Carbs, 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 white food, carbs, bread, pasta, pizza with chicken nuggets. McDonald's has something in their ketchup, I've decided. It's a ketchup thing. There's somehow, I'll figure out what it is. And think about what carbs do to you. Blood sugar, okay? Up and downs in this, okay? So you start seeing this happen with those group of kids. One of the things you'll start seeing also is limited play skills, which is probably something people probably don't think about when they think about children who have regulatory difficulties. You will see some changes in play skills. They want to do the same thing over and over. Remember I talked about predictability and routine, keep it the same. They may not go to the selected areas that you have around. They may want to have that same train set out. You're going to meet Cooper, and Cooper was one of those people. I had to have the same thing out every day, and it probably lasted for 4 months. And you'll see a couple pictures of Cooper, and he's done really, really well. But they tend to play alone, some of these children, because they're the ones who are in what? Your fight, flight, or fright. They're in that emotional brain. They can't handle necessarily being around those other 13 kids, so they like to go off to themselves. And you'll see that shift around 3 to 5 years during that period, okay? So those are just common things you may see. Okay, self-regulation is not the same as obedience, the same as compliance, okay? Because when you have a self-regulated child, they behave the same way no matter what, whether you're watching them or not, okay? And that's how you know it. They're going to behave the same way. As I always say to my parents, you think Bobby left the house today going, I'm going to go aggravate Miss Tessa at school. I think I'll throw those blocks. No, they don't do that. They don't leave home saying, I think I'm going to go aggravate you today, okay? So those are the kids that you go, okay, what is going on? Because they're going to self-regulate. They're going to behave this way no matter what, okay? That's what self-regulation is not. All right, so here's what's important to know. Early, self-soothing, comforting, use of distractions, and help-seeking behaviors are critical to self-regulation getting developed. I have so many children who do not know to ask for help. Help me. Help me. Okay? And because our classrooms and our lives are so busy, I think we don't stop a lot of times. We are very guilty of not doing the self-soothing, not doing the comforting, and not using distractions to help kids through transitions and to change. We're busy. We're so busy. We got to get the next thing ready before the last thing was even done, right? I mean, that's the nature of our beast, unfortunately, of our environments and of the way the world is now. But it's those things that I call a lot of times, if you've heard any of my other workshops, I talk about kid power. And kid power develops when kids get a lot of opportunity to say, I did it, I can do it. That's when they start doing, I don't need you as much, I'm going to ask for your help, but I can go do this and I'm not reliant upon you. The kids who have self-regulatory difficulties, dysregulated, do not get to that kid power very often. They don't feel good. And so they're the kids who need even more nurturance. And so there's ways that because we are so busy and we can't a lot of times give that hug, bring them into this flexion, do that support, do that patting, that we can use things in our environment to give that to them, okay? That gives them the support. And that's some of those second order strategies. It's the use of beanbag chairs at times because I'm going to put this child back into this nice calming position. We'll talk a little bit about that. So we have to have that warm support and guidance from parents and other attachment figures. And attachment figures include grandmas, grandpas, caretakers, brothers, sisters, all of that. I'll make sure I'm not skipping anything. But The thing is, you guys, is we have to teach this to this group of kids. And I think the key thing is, right, teach. We have to teach it. Because, again, they don't have it happening for them. So it is teaching, teaching, teaching. How do I get you to ask for help? How do I get you to try to figure out what the next strategy is today so that what happened yesterday doesn't happen again today? All right? That's the whole putting out the fires. All right. So, here's me. Here's Cooper. All you're going to see is me without a shoe on. No. This is a little guy that every day, and you're going to meet him twice again here today, I had to have this train set out, or any train set out. It did not matter. He has something we call motor planning difficulty or praxis. He's a screamer. The mailman comes to the door. He screams because the mailman came out of nowhere, apparently. He looks at his mom. He screams. So he wants something to rely on all the time. He carries a train around 24/7. He sleeps with his trains. He has his trains everywhere. They're all over his house. So when he comes to the office, there's this part of the room where this is more towards the end. What we first started with was this little track and just the green part. And we would just sit together. And I'd watch the train with him. And the mom would go by and say, I can't believe I'm paying you for this. And I'd say, yes, you are. And so we would sit here and we would watch. And then what I eventually did was start gradually adding things to his play. I want to extend out that play, but I want him to feel comfortable with me changing it. Because remember, change is not easy for them. Stopping and moving is not easy. So we got to the point where I was eventually adding tunnels, the bridges, and in the meantime, he's sitting back watching it. But what does he have with him?
His train.
His blankie.
And his train.
He would, and this was a blanket I had at the office. It wasn't one that he necessarily brought, but I thought, I've got to give him something that he can start putting into that emotional brain that says, oh, this is my quiet, calming time with Miss Julie. We do what? Vision. Remember, second order, I look at things, I feel things. And those kids, if you can just set up some things that are only related to vision, will do some self-calming. And I've got these in your self-calming tricks. Visual toys will provide self-calming. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to play with it. I just want to watch it. Okay? And if you have motor planning problems, that's really all you can do is watch it. You set it up. They don't know what else to do. So we give them the ideas of, well, look what else you can do. So then it creates that idea of, oh, I can go to block play and go get the blocks and make a tunnel. So he finally got to the stage, but we would sit over there, and that was me doing this. Warm support and guidance. Because this poor little guy was in chaos all day long. He had very little periods of time where it was just shoo. So we started introducing those. I used myself as a therapeutic tool. Okay? So, when should you worry? Is it a behavior? Because I always get this question. Well, that's just a behavior. Yeah, it is a behavior. Well, yeah. They're trying to tell you something. But here's what you're going to find out. Is it a behavior or a self-regulation problem? If you are spending 2 to 4 hours a day trying to calm that little person, you probably have somebody with a self-regulatory difficulty. Remember, most children can self-calm. But these kids can, and they can do it, but they don't have the strategies. And that's the key thing on this number 2. They can, and they can get there. They just don't have the strategies, you guys. They feel this way all the time. They think this is normal. So it's our job to do the TEACH. I got to teach you. I got to support you externally in my environment and some emotional support for this group of kids, okay? Once they're upset, they take a lot of extra effort to calm. Okay, so think about that. If you've got a little one, and you won't see that it's a set 2 to 4 hours, but it's if you start taking a timer and go, all right, I'm going to have to go get him. Set your timer, go back and do something. Same child, hit the timer. Oh my gosh, I'm back there again. And you find yourself doing that a lot. That's probably one of our children that may have early first order regulation difficulties, body temperature, picky eaters, sleep issues. Okay, so keep thinking of that. Those are the things you want to find out.